Back in October of 2025, I was tabling at the Albuquerque Zine Fest, and someone came up to my table and handed me a zine. I'd never seen him before, never met him, didn't know who he was. It looked like he was just going table to table to table handing out his zine. That person was Myke Skye, and the zine was Joteria. Myke Skye lives in New Mexico, grew up in New Mexico. Not necessarily a writer, not necessarily a zinester. I think this is his first zine, but he's got a story that he wants to tell, and he worked hard to put it out. So let's take a moment and talk about Joteria. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Take a Moment. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a zine called Joteria. To start off, let's introduce ourselves. My name's Billy McCall. Everybody who watches this YouTube channel knows me. We have Larry with us.
Hi, Larry. I'm in Chicago. I know Billy through making zines, but I'm new to making zines. Maybe, gosh, not so new now, maybe 4 years. Um, so excited to be part of this adventure.
Hello, yeah, my name is Emmy. I'm also here in Albuquerque. I've played in a bunch of bands with Billy and made zines and caused trouble all throughout Albuquerque in our shared time here together. So I'm excited to talk more about Albuquerque with this zine for sure.
And then down in the bottom right corner, we have Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal Radicus, and I've been making zines for 25 years or more. Billy actually got me into zines all that time ago.
So I like that. So this zine was written by someone that's in Albuquerque, and we have two Albuquerque people and two Chicago people here to talk about it tonight. The zine is called Joteria, and it was written by someone named Myke Skye. And I don't know, Emmy, why don't you start us off and tell us what this zine is about?
I essentially Joteria is about coming out and coming of age as a gay man in Albuquerque in the 1970s, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly, which I find uh, really, really wonderful. It's both a coming of age and coming out story, but it's also a story about the city of Albuquerque and kind of how it had its own very I mean, I don't want to necessarily say unique queer and gay scene, but definitely things that were different than like other big cities at the time, for sure.
Yeah, it does take place in the most of the story is like late 70s, maybe kind of getting into early 80s. And yeah, it's really interesting because it is a gay story and a queer story, but it's also a coming of age story, like you said. And it brought up all these like ideas of like, when you're in high school and trying to find yourself, so it's kind of like a really interesting take.
Yeah, I found it kind of fascinating. So my life has been mostly urban, and my coming out roughly the same time, early 70s, really was much more in the context of a college campus and a university town, and um, like I was sort of stumbling in relationships with friends that were sort of sexual, but we didn't have any words for it. We weren't part of a bigger community. And then I saw these two guys who were very clearly in love with each other and realized, oh, I don't have to be in this struggling trying to figure it out. People have figured this out. They're doing it. And they became my guides, and my everything like flipped 180 from being this big anguish thing to, oh, this is really very straightforward. So to be reading about a very different kind of culture, a car cruising culture, a parking lot cruising culture, outside of gay bars because we're not old enough to go into the bar, we're not old enough to go into the porn shop. I just found it really, really fascinating. And I was also taken by how much, as you guys were saying, that it's of a place. Like there are lots of Albuquerque landmarks. I was there recently visiting with Billy, and he was like, "Hey, this place is still here, or here under a new name, but a new old name since the '80s." Um, Yeah, so it feels very of a place. And that was kind of wonderful.
Yeah, I always love a map in a book or in a zine. And I didn't live in Albuquerque in the 70s. I've been here for about 15 years, but all the stuff that he's talking about, I'm like, oh, the intersection of this and the intersection of that and that. And I love thinking about, oh, like these street corners that I've been down a million times, like they have a history that I don't even know about. So that was a really fun part of the zine.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know about you, Billy, but like definitely after reading it, like because a lot of it does take place in our kind of like down our central like main drag street, which was much more bright and vibrant and colorful back in the 70s and much more lively kind of than it is today. It really was like city center and it was part of Route 66. And like when I go driving in those areas, I'm always like, it's like I can't believe like that used to be Albuquerque because a lot of it, there's a lot of open space, there's a lot of, you know, uh, you know, for rent signs on the buildings. A lot of the things that he talks about, like, are totally gone, but then some of them like are are still there, and it's like trying to figure out like the geography of it, or just thinking about like Albuquerque as like the different kind of city still emerging again was really interesting.
Crystal, I forgot to mention, I don't want to tell everybody out there, Crystal just released her first book, Henri Cuss, and I'm about
Okay.
halfway through it, and it's really, really good. Crystal, let me hear from you because your book and a lot of your writing has to do with coming of age and growing up and maybe growing up too fast. And how did that mindset kind of play into your thought process when you were reading this scene?
I really, really loved this scene. It is a coming of age, coming out story, and it's a timepiece too. So like since it happened before I was born, it's cool to see like this little literary snapshot of what cruising was like in Albuquerque in the 70s. And it is also like a love letter to Albuquerque with like the list of monuments and bars and the map. Um, One thing that like really got me interested is like the very first page. He said the zine is based on a chapter from my fictional autobiography. What else is Mike Skye writing? I want to read more. This was so good. I thought the name was funny. I'm familiar with the term Hoto, but Joteria, thinking, like the game Lotteria. It was not what I expected at all, but like even the artwork is great, like this clip art stuff. It really sets a scene. And then he like mentions all this music, and on the back there's a playlist because like music is really tied to memory, and he yeah, he's just so unapologetic about getting his life story down. It kind of reminded me of New Kind of Kick, the Kid Congo Powers
Mm.
autobiography that just came out. It's sort of similar, like being young and in Chicano and coming out in that time period. This is an awesome zine. I really hope he writes a book or more zines.
Yeah, my understanding is that he's not like a trained writer. He didn't go to school for writing, but he just has this
It's awesome.
story, yeah, that he wants it to tell. And he has three issues. I sent you guys the first issue, but there's two others, and I think that the plan is sort of keep writing zines kind of as chapters and then put them together. And I don't know how much of it's real and how much of it's going to be, fictionalized or whatever. It's one of those, Crystal, you just went through this with your book of where it's like
Yeah.
real stories with fake names kind of vibe. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so it's kind of tricky to write your story and your life story because some of the people in this like maybe they don't want to be outed like that, or maybe they've passed away, or maybe they're on good terms or bad terms, and so sometimes it's hard to tell your story and still be respectful of everyone that's involved in the story and all that. It gets kind of complicated sometimes, but yeah, my understanding is that he's just going to keep writing zines until he has enough to put it together as a book, which is exactly what Crystal did. So.
I want to jump in with another little bit of history. So, like I said, so the early 70s was when I came out, and so he has a reference to the Lambda. which was a very early, his credit is my understanding correct, from the gay activists in 1970. And it was sort of a very short-lived symbol in the gay community. And then he references in the text the rainbow flag. I would probably add the pink triangle if I was doing my symbology. But it was sort of very touching to see this thing that, I really don't think about very much, but was sort of a marker for this is a gay space, this is a queer space.
Is that
Um,
a symbol that you remember first coming
yeah,
across, or like you would
yeah,
see it?
yeah, yeah. I had a friend who had kind of a flag at his house with this on it. And it was like, who knows, right? It's like if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. It's just like this Greek letter.
I love that.
So it was sort of a very nice way to kind of identify. I'm going to take us on a little bit of a tangent. So this was all new to me. I thought, well, what is this? Right? I mean, he tells us, right, Joteria. But it's like, what does the internet tell me? Which got me to this,
Oh,
which is this wonderful um, game box, right? That's got a booklet. I'll put in an ad for this other thing, right? It's got this booklet. Um, the creator's friends all posed in costumes. And then he tells us, the story of all of the characters on the cards in English and Spanish. We've got playing cards.
Oh my
We've,
God, that's amazing.
we've got a box of the actual lottery cards.
That's great.
With great illustrations, and a box of tokens to mark your bingo cards with. So
That's awesome.
so I have to thank the zine for enriching my life with kind of more Mexican American culture that I was oblivious to.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more explanation for anyone that might not know. The word hoto is sort of like a slur or a slang for like a gay person. It might be something that maybe someone yells at you out a car window, or if you're with your friends, it's something you lovingly call each other, you know. And so Joteria is sort of a play on that. And then it's also a play on La Toria, which is like the Mexican bingo game. So that's like a gay Mexican bingo game. Yeah, it's an interesting zine because it's a coming of age story. You know, it's a teenager trying to figure out themselves and their sexuality and understand themselves. It's a coming out story. It's a gay story. It's what it's like to be, kind of secretly gay, and you don't want people to know. It might be dangerous and all these sorts of things. But it's also a Chicano story. It's also, a Hispanic story and someone that, and that's like a whole thing that I don't know anything about, and so it's like all these kind of like different stories happening at the same time, and also on top of that, so I identify as queer, and I've dated men from time to time and dated trans people and stuff, but I never had like a coming out like story where I had to like I just suddenly was like, oh, I'm kind of attracted to men, I'm gonna date some men from time to time. And it's just interesting to think about someone, because when I was a teenager, I was attracted to women and trying to date girls, but it was like a really nerve-wracking experience, and I didn't have to keep it a secret, but it was already nerve-wracking just because you're a teenager trying to figure it out. So then having like a layer of secrecy on top of that and a layer of fear, you don't know how your family would react, or like it might be dangerous. So like that's a whole different story. And then on top of all of that, it talks about cruising culture, which I is just like something I've seen in movies. I've never actually lived the cruising culture where dudes are just driving around in cars picking up other dudes, like that's a whole different world for me. So like that was all really, really fascinating too.
and doing that like in Albuquerque, like because like we still do, but have always had like a kind of like more mainstream cruising car, like literally cars cruising down like Central, and like at that time, especially like, all of Route 66, like weekends, like they would people would get in their cars, and that was another thing I kept imagining was like, while that's happening and while like the rest of the public is showing off their vehicles or like they're being social, like right around the back of all these buildings, off that main strip, or like, I think he talked about like I think a Wiener Schnitzel or something that used to be on Central, like as being a spot. And like, there's all these things kind of going on that people aren't even aware of. And even thinking about again, like Central and how like a lot of cities, like they're like like they have like business drags, and then there's like still businesses kind of going out, but like off Central, like you go right off of that and you're immediately in like residential areas and houses. And so like, they're like I'm sitting here thinking about like, okay, so they're behind all these businesses, and like right across the street from where this happening is like people's like, familial lives are going on, and like how close in proximity they are to it, and yet how like far away they are also like at the same time.
Yeah, 100% everything you said. Because so Central Avenue is Route 66, and so it is the main drag that goes all the way through Albuquerque, and so it's all like hotels and drive-in, fast food joints and stuff like that. And like in a city like Chicago, you have the downtown that's all a lot of business buildings and stuff, but you don't really have people that like live downtown. And like Central Avenue, like Emmy said, like it's business, 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 but as soon as you're off of that, like it's not a business downtown at all. It's just residential. So
It's fascinating to me, speaking of the culture, that everybody in here has a name, right? We have the guy in the Bug, we have the guy in the Volvo, we have the stalker guy who works for DMV and is tracking down people's license plates and calling them at home. I mean, it's quite kind of a fascinating culture that's being described in, you know, bookstore, John,
yeah,
something like that, right? Like people have nicknames, and there's like this, but it's all mediated by like this visual, right? It's the Volkswagen Bug guy, it's the blue Volvo guy,
the Afro guy.
the Afro, that right. Our character's the Afro guy. Um, and I feel like that kind of I don't know, visual display. Like I'm known because of the car I'm driving. I'm known because of my hair. I'm known like and people are using pseudonyms. People are not necessarily putting their identity out there, right? But they're making connections. And so it's a wonderful view into a world that I was re never really a part of.
One part that I thought was interesting. So the main character, he's a teenager. I think he's maybe 17 or something, like a junior or senior in high school around that age. And he lives in Belen with his family. And Belen is south of Albuquerque, like a half an hour south of Albuquerque. So then him and his buddy Marcus, they go up and they're like cruising the strip or whatever. And his friend Marcus is like, oh, that's where the Hotos hang out. That's where the gay bar is. And like Marcus has this mysterious knowledge that we never really fully understand of like if is Marcus gay or is he like how does he know these things? And you never really find out. But like his first experience of like cruising around Albuquerque, like him and Marcus are having fun and then they go back like that was cool. So then they go back to Belen and go their separate ways. And like the very same night, he immediately gets in his car and goes back because he's still curious. And there's just like this air of danger where I'm like nervous for him, but it's exciting. And everything goes well until like the one dude, like you said, like tracks him back to Belen and is like stalking him in his hometown. And then you're like, oh, this is serious business. This is actually you're playing grown-up games now. You got to be careful.
There's a real like hero's journey kind of element to it too, like with like Marcus is like like the gatekeeper, where he's like, here is all of this new knowledge, and like, and so then our main character is like, okay, I'm gonna leave home, like he literally like leaves home. He has this like option of like staying, but like that night, yeah, he like literally leaves home and is like, okay, I'm gonna go out on my own. I'm gonna find this world on my own. And like, um it'd be really like I'm really interested actually to see like how like the story progresses like through like chapters 2 and 3, like if it does have that element. And but one thing I love about it though is like his writing is so kind of just like it's very descriptive and it's very factual, but it does have this like very like storytelling quality to it that I really, really like, like latched onto. I mean, I read the zine in one sitting, because I was just like, I just always wanted to know, like, what is this kid gonna do next? What is he gonna do next? Like the narrative was just really, really solid.
Yeah, I totally agree. The writing was really compelling. It's written to the point and factual, but it's also very laid back, like how everyone actually speaks. Um, I felt like I was there when he's like chatting, palling around with his buddy, and they're going out and just out of curiosity checking out the bars and the adult theater and the porno shop. I remember being that age and not old enough to get in and kind of like peeking around the door and wondering who goes in there, what's in there. The writing was just so on point. I'm gonna email Myke and ask if I can get some information by the rest of his zines. I'm kind of hooked. It's a great soap opera.
Yeah, also, and in terms of fictional or more autobiographical, that first hookup where we go with the guy in his car to his dorm room and they're making out and the roommate shows up and then disappears and then they have their moment together. It just felt so sweet, so wonderful. Like I can imagine that going sideways in so many different ways, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like it's really heartwarming because, all kinds of shit could have happened and it didn't.
Well, he got done telling the whole story about how someone is like stalking him, and then he goes back and he meets some other guy, and yeah, they go back to UNM to the dorm rooms, and I was so nervous. I'm like, oh man, is the guy gonna rob him? Is this guy gonna blackmail him? Is this guy, they're gonna get back, and the roommate comes in and they're like making fun of him, but none of that happened. It actually goes like so perfectly. It is like you said, very, very sweet, and you get like I had like this sense of relief of like, oh, I'm so glad you know, it's not like he found true love, but he had like a really meaningful connection and it was really nice.
Yeah, and to Crystal's point, it really makes me want to read more.
Well, there are two more issues, and I think he's working on a fourth one as well, so there is more coming. Um, I also liked the color, the full color. I like the overall production. It doesn't feel like it's not a cut and paste zine. It's like put together on a computer and laid out nicely. And I love messy, scrappy cut and paste scenes, but when you have one that's just kind of like this, it puts the focus more on the writing and on the actual story. And there's just little visuals, and I think he did the visuals himself, and they're just little computer, made little graphics made on computers, but it still like puts that visual of cars, and the different things, and I don't know, I liked it.
The art was very like endearing too. I mean, it has this almost. I mean, it definitely has like and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like an amateur quality to it. It's not, it looks good and it has this unique style, but it is also very like playful and, kind of cartoony and um which just brings like kind of like I don't know, an air of like mystery and intrigue. Like when you sent it to us like without like a lot of context, and so I get this, in my mailbox and I open it up and just like, okay, like, I mean, it's typical Billy like present, like, what is Billy giving me now, right? But like I had no like read on it, like just from the cover, but like it was so unique that I was like, well, obviously I'm gonna dive into this and just going through it, I was like, wow, this is something different that you don't see in zines, often. And I mean, I get the impression that this is probably like his first time ever doing a zine. Um, and again, like I don't mean that as like an insult at all. Like because like what's so great about it is that it's like he's just taking like his idea of the concept, right? Like we all do in our first zine and just like putting it together like in his imagination and so much of himself, not just in the writing but in the visuals comes out as well.
Yeah, I think there's some things in here that are like really culturally smart. Like we get this, right? Like we get the phone on the wall with the cord, right? As well as the crucifix up above it. It's like, oh yeah, here I am at home. I'm getting a phone call at home,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So I feel like there's a lot of very cleverness in these basically very straightforward graphics. And I feel like he's working the form really, really well. The cars show up, the guy on the bicycle shows up. There's a sweet portrait of somebody with an afro, right? So it's
I
like,
believe I believe that's him with his afro.
so it just feels very engaging. Also like that he's helping us who don't know the culture, don't know Albuquerque. Like he does a very good job of saying something and then like, oh, here's how we got there. And now back to the story. And it doesn't feel awkward. It just feels helpful.
Yeah, there's little bits of Spanish sprinkled in, and he explains what the Spanish is, and it's yeah, I do think this is his first zine, and it's interesting because, these events took place when he was 17, 18, 19, 20. Like, what would the zine have been like if he wrote it when he was 20? But he didn't write it when he
Mm.
was 20. So he's like older now, and he's looking back on these memories of, his first experiences. And I think that gives it a little bit of, maturity and a little bit of, I don't know, he's just able to, through the lens of time, able to kind of have a good perspective on the stuff that he went through.
I think the last thing I want to say is like I also really appreciated it because like um it talks about like gay culture in Albuquerque and like talks about it historically. Um, again, like we're a Southwest city, it's a small city. It was an even smaller city, back in the 70s. It really was like a dusty town in the middle of nowhere. And and just having like some like historical context, being a queer person in Albuquerque, like, and having a little bit more of that historical context is really great. When you sent this to me, there was a showing of a documentary called The Whistle, which was about lesbian culture in the 70s, and like they're kind of they had this code whistle like to kind of signal out again, like kind of like Larry was saying with the Lambda sign, but like it was like their own little call that they kind of brought in, and just again like having that zine and having that documentary together just like broadens my understanding of this place that I call home, and I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, all of that. Thank you for mentioning that. I know that he is familiar with that film and
Yeah.
knows some of the people in that film.
I'll put in a plug also for people doing this kind of reflecting back. Like, I feel like it's so easy for our history to get lost and to have people at various points in our lives take a moment and look back and talk about the culture then and how it really leads to now, right? I think it's just so super helpful to have these very human stories that are our history and that they're alive. And it isn't just this abstract thing. It's people's lives. It's a culture, and it's kept alive because of the storytelling that we're doing now.
I totally agree. And zines have always, no matter what happens, we always have zines. And when you live in this crazy world where it feels like fascism is closing in around us, like it is up to us to tell our stories. You can't wait for someone else to tell it. We have to tell our stories how we want to tell them. So it's nice to get this personal story, but also a very real history of, what it was like back then. Thank you guys so much. Uh, Joteria, available on ilovezines.com. We'll have to all get together and read issue 2.
Yeah,
Very
sounds
good.
good.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you guys.
Night.
Bye.